I've worn a cap for too long. The cap was too tight. My barber used dirty clippers. It only comes from my mother's side of the family. And my military helmet wore all my hair off. All things that I hear all too frequently here in the office when we're talking about hair restoration. And today we're going to be talking about how none of those things really have anything to do with why your hair is falling out, especially if you're a male. So today we're going to be talking about male pattern baldness or androgenic alopecia, and I'm Dr. Paul Pearce. Welcome back to The Plastic Life, and get ready to learn something. Today we're going to be talking about male pattern hair loss, or otherwise known as androgenic alopecia, and the main reasons why it occurs. Some of those old mothers, wives' tales, things that you heard me present at the beginning of the video, a lot of people will come into the office and explain that as the reason why they feel like their hair is falling out. In reality, it's due to two main reasons, both of which, if you're a male, you really don't have much control over. One is genetics, and two is your hormones. So we need to talk about both in different orders here. So your genetics. So in order for you to lose your hair, you really have to have the genes that are responsible for hair loss. And we really don't know too much about these genes because they haven't really been well studied. We have identified a few of the genes that can cause hair loss, and some people will ask, well, why don't we just use gene therapy to turn those genes off? Well, in reality, if you don't know the full effect of what that gene does, if you try to turn it off, it could have some unknown effects on the rest of the body. So not really a good idea to go messing around with genes just to be able to keep your hair. So even though we've identified multiple genes that can cause hair loss, and there's not too much known about them, you really have to understand that there are multiple genes that could work in conjunction to result in hair loss. So now that we understand that we have to have a gene that causes the hair loss, the second thing we have to understand is that you now need a hormone to cause that hair loss. And that hormone in men is testosterone. And this is the reason why you don't really see hair loss in men or young boys occurring before a certain age. You typically need to go through puberty in order to start experiencing hair loss. Yes, there are some people that can experience it much earlier than that, and that is sometimes often related to different things. But once puberty kicks in, the testosterone levels rise, and the testosterone, which is circulating throughout the body, will pass through the scalp region. And once it passes through the scalp region, it also will be converted to dihydrotestosterone in these hair follicles by an enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. Now, you don't need to memorize all this stuff, but if you're nerdy and want to get into all the technical aspects of it, there it is for you. So now that you have dihydrotestosterone and now you have the gene for hair loss, once your DHT levels rise enough, now it starts causing an effect on your hair follicles. So your hair follicles go from these thick cable-like structures, if you look at them up real close, and eventually they start to fall out, but the next set that comes back through is now a little thinner. And that dihydrotestosterone that continues to develop in the body will now cause the second time it falls out to come back even thinner until it's this very thin, wispy hair, and eventually it never comes back. So this now results in male pattern hair loss. So you might be wondering why you might only lose hair in a certain pattern or typical place if you're a man. Well, that could be due to a number of reasons, and sometimes the hair loss that you experience is not all the same throughout your scalp. But one of the reasons that we think that it occurs is because the enzyme 5-alpha reductase can be of higher concentration up here on the top of the scalp, in the forelock, the mid-bridge, and the crown region, versus the posterior aspect of the scalp. So typically we don't really see much hair loss in this region here along the sides and along the back of the scalp. And it's because we think that the 5-alpha reductase enzyme is in lower concentrations in those areas. So therefore you don't really see much in the way of hair loss there. Whereas up here on the top of the scalp, you tend to see a lot higher concentration of that, and the DHT has a higher effect, causing the hair loss to be much more significant. So that might be one of the reasons why. Now there could be other factors as well, but sometimes you'll see people where they have a patch of hair loss here and it extends forward in just one little area, or it's really just right here in the front forelock area, or just along the front hairline. So everybody will lose hair in a different pattern, but the typical pattern is really just from the front hairline back to the crown region. So now that we've talked about hair loss, why is this important? Why is losing your hair a big deal? Why have you watched this far into the video? Well, talking about hair loss and experiencing hair loss kind of equates to being seen in our culture, in many cultures, as being advanced in age. Whenever you see someone depicted in a film or in the cartoons or anything like that, the older people typically have a little bit of hair loss or the male pattern baldness that you see. So if you're in your teens and early 20s, having hair loss, you're kind of thought of as being seen as a little bit older, and sometimes people feel like they're less desirable to a certain someone. So that's the main reason that people get really concerned about their hair losses, especially if they're in their younger years. They want to be seen as being sexually viable, someone who is sexually attractive, and in multiple cultures, hair loss has not really been accepted as that. Now, there's certain ways to go for it. You can shave your head, kind of like I did, and a lot of people are into that, but most people want to have their hair. They want to keep their hair for as long as possible. So the reason that it's important to talk about why you're losing your hair is to kind of keep in mind as to what you can do about that at a later date. So sometimes you have to kind of keep in mind that a lot of these treatments that are out there on the market are not fully vetted. They're not fully screened or tested in a scientific manner. So a lot of snake oils are out there floating around, things like that, that will promise you the world but not really deliver. So kind of keep that in mind as you're going through this hair loss journey. And now that you know a little bit more about why your hair is falling out, now you can kind of look into steps to correct those, and we'll talk about those on a later video. So hope you all enjoyed this video, and I hope you've at least learned something today. Keep an eye out for our next video series here. We're going to be doing quite a few videos on hair loss and talking a lot about this, as there's not really a lot of great information out there for people, and we're hoping to kind of build on that a little bit more here on the channel. So if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one.